Welcome back to Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, the recap of the Women's Elite World Championships road race from Uster to Zurich. We had several local laps, 3 local laps. We had the entrance to the circuit has the hard bins climb. It's actually the hardest climb of the whole course, 1,500 meters at 9.4%. That's 27 k's in. Then the 4 loops of the Witticon circuit, which we saw several times in the junior road races and the U23 men yesterday. Flat finish. We've seen a couple of small group sprints. We've seen some solos, terrible weather. We've seen that the course is actually, it's hard, but it's the main climb, like we said in the preview, is not that hard. It's actually difficult to drop people on that 1,400 meter 7% climb. It's very steady. It's a big road. There's no sneaky place to attack. The plateau on top has been the most dangerous part for moves and the steep pinches there. Anything pre-race, Benji? There was a bit of words, I think, between Kopecky and Vollering about she's not riding with her teammates or something.
Yeah, there was something about, I think Vollering said that Kopecky is not riding with her teammates, is always riding solo or something, and then Kopecky posted a picture with her teammates, but I'll be honest, I wasn't focusing on the banter too much. I avoided it a bit, and I came to a race, and I was hoping for a good race today. As simple as that. And the thing is, like, the circuit starts from the start of the course on this parkour, which means that there's climbs relatively early on, but even before we get to the action, we already had a crash in one of the 2 main teams. Lore de Schepper, the 18-year-old on a Belgian team. DNFs after a crash would have been honestly one of the top 5, top 4 riders on the Belgian team, I would say here, because in that Belgian team, I'd be looking at obviously Kopecky, but next to that, Hakira, Julie van der Velde, and then maybe Lore de Schepper in that team as one of the riders that we could see in the last 50 kilometers still play a role. But that's not going to happen. Also, had a solid chance of the U23 World Championship, so that was carved out too. But what was noticeable for me in the first, let's say, 2 laps...
before the race, we mentioned it also, before the race, and we'll address this at the end of the podcast, there was the terrible news of the passing of Muriel Fouret, a local Swiss cyclist in the junior women's road race on Thursday, which we didn't cover that race nor the U23 men's yesterday, but we'll talk about that a bit more at the end of the podcast as its own, I think, topic, very tragic topic, but there was a minute's silence for her at the beginning of the race. There will be no UCI Gala, which is normally held at this World Championships, and so that was also the cloud under which this race was being taken out as young Swiss riders who presumably knew her, like Nomi Rug, in this race, in the elite race as well, because there's no U23 women's race. So tragic news, which was on everybody's mind and also mentioned by the winner at the end of the race, but we'll discuss that sad news at the end.
So in the first 2 laps of this course, I was looking at, okay, how is Netherlands, how is Belgium going to ride this? Because in the preview, we were talking about the fact that, okay, we've got Belgium with Kopecky, and a worse team on paper than the Dutch team. Not a horrible team on paper. The Schepper out, of course, after that crash. Dutch team, or a team with numerous riders that could win this race. Not just Vollering. It's also the likes of Vos. Even Marcus could win this. Pietersen could win this, etc. So there's multiple riders in that team that could win this World Championship. So I was expecting the Netherlands to roll attacks on Belgium, because that seems like the logical strategy, to try and isolate Kopecky as early as possible to make sure she has to respond to the attacks as early as possible herself. And in the first 2 laps, we saw some moves by the Netherlands, including Rianne Marcus very active in trying to anticipate. There was an early move that didn't necessarily bring to something, which was a response by Justine Hikire in the Belgian team. So you saw Belgium reacting to the Netherlands, and that would be something that we would see for the first half of the race. We also saw a bit of a move by Kopecky herself, actually, at 118 kilometers to go, doing a bit of a test move. Might have been on the Zurich Bergstrasse in lap 2. Not 100% certain about the position of that, but eventually we get to around 80-85 kilometers, and a group has been created in multiple phases. And that included the riders I mentioned earlier. So Marcus once again tried to get ahead, so Hakira started to join that. Sara Gigante was pretty active as well in trying to get ahead in the race. Fisher Black as well, Majruz, etc. and eventually Bredewold also bridged towards that Marcus group. So eventually a group of 11, including Hikira, Bredewold, Marcus, so 2 riders for the Netherlands, Paladin of Italy, Gigante for Australia, Hartmann for Switzerland, Francesca Koch for Germany, Fisher Black for New Zealand, Otterstad for Norway, and Majorus for Luxembourg, together with Urška Žigard of the Slovenian team. So 11 riders, and if you look at that, with about, let's say, 85, 90 kilometers to go, who do you think is in the best position here? Bredewold, Marcus in a breakaway with Hikira, and the peloton is 17 seconds behind.
The Netherlands. Marcus just won a cold solo in Romandy. She's probably the best all-rounder in the group. Bredewold's won European champs. Okay, she's not going to win from the favourites group, but they got numbers. It's the Netherlands. Because we've seen in the previous races, the pure climbers, they kind of fade on this course, and it's too hard for them to create separations. I'm talking about Fisher Black here, Sarah Gigante. Like, they're not going to drop Marcus on 6%. And even if the reality is as well, Benji, like, this group's probably not going to make it all the way to the finish. It's so far away that this is a perfect situation for the Netherlands, because it is at least scary enough for everyone else that France has got a pace, Poland has got a pace, Italy. I mean, do they really back Paladin in this group against 2 Dutch riders? So I think the Netherlands, this is their plan, clearly. Otherwise, why are the others jumping? And they should have been happy with it.
I think so as well. That's a perfectly feasible scenario where you have multiple riders up front. That's what you want when you have a rider with a team with the ability to create numerical advantages, to be able to put pressure on Kopecky in the peloton. You just want other teams to close that down, which wasn't exactly happening. The gap wasn't huge, but there was no real team like Belgium coming to the front, because, well, their best domestique for Kopecky is in the breakaway herself, Justine Hikira. And when it comes to other teams, okay, maybe Italy has Paladin ahead and isn't happy with that, but on the other end, do they really think it's dangerous enough yet that they're going to start closing? Maybe if the gap started going further out towards 60 kilometers to go, etc. But the team that wasn't allowing that gap to grow out was the Netherlands, who had 75 kilometers to go. Going into, I think, the third last lap, started pacing themselves behind that group. Repeat, in that breakaway, there's Bredewold and we've got Marcus. Those are 2 riders that, in that front group, have a pretty damn solid chance of winning.
Yeah.
And even if that group doesn't win, you want to use it for other teams to close it down. But no, Royakkers goes to the front with Voring in the wheel, and Royakkers starts spacing that group back. And on one end, the theory I saw on the internet was, okay, they might be trying to make the race harder for Voring, but what is the point of having Bredewold and Marcus ahead then?
Exactly.
If you want to make the race hard, because then you want those riders at the front of the peloton making the race as hard as possible. You're reducing the strength to make the race as hard as possible by having those riders in the breakaway, and you're nullifying the advantage you got from putting them there in the first place. So, brainless strategy.
I got no problem if before this race the Netherlands said Vollring's our biggest chance to win. It's a hard course. She knows it well. She's in good shape. And we're going to go all out for her like Slovenia might do for Pogačar. Got no problem with it. But as Benji says, then you just ride it like UAE rode Montreal. You just one by one get your strong Netherlands teams to smash it up every hill from far out and make the race absolutely brutal, and then finally get Royakkers to do an uphill lead out. And she will probably drop everybody in that situation. I would say she probably would have dropped everybody if they'd made the circuits consistently hard, and she was left to do one burst, you know? I'm talking she gets one big attack when everyone's on their knees. Instead, you nullify the tactical advantage of having riders in front. You stop them possibly winning the race. You also don't really make the race that hard. You kind of just drop Royakkers. Like, you're not really making it that hard. You're pacing one climb for 5 minutes. It's a 5-minute climb, and then you're off the gas. It's just the worst of both worlds. But that group comes back, Benji, and then the same riders re-attack. Marcus and Vos, right?
Yeah, it makes Marcus and Bredewold are the ones that roll attacks first, and there's no separation there really. We see Hikira being the only Belgian rider left, which
she was so
I was
good.
kind of surprised by that. Like, I was expecting more than Hikira to be there. at this point in the race. Obviously, I've spoken already, the Schepper is out, but Van der Velde, etc. I was expecting something more here when it comes to Belgium. That I do have to say. And it's kind of Netherlands controlling for the next phase towards the second last lap with Vos pacing as well. And I'm kind of surprised that Vos is pacing at this point too, because she's your second option if Vollering can't get the separation on the last 2 laps. And we go into the second last lap, and this is where it takes another turn for, I would argue, the worst. Because with 50 kilometers to go, we go towards the Zurich Bergstrasse, that steep hill at the start of the laps, at the start of the circuit. And we see Vollering pushing herself on that Zurich Bergstrasse. We get over that. Obviously, some riders drop, etc. in that group. The group is now, it's now 50 riders, maybe, something like that. We get to the Wittikon climb after that. And we see Roaker starting to pace again for Vollering. Vos and Marcus in trouble. Well, they've been pacing and anticipating this race so far, so it's not shocking. But I wouldn't have used Vos before to prevent what is happening right now. Shout out to Eva Holmgren, who was still in the group at this point, started dropping here as well. I think Fariba Hashimi also was dropping on this climb, etc. Nivia Doma in trouble at this point, so not in the form that she was in at the Tour de France run.
Dropped ages ago or behind a crash.
Yeah, true. And Roaker's dropped herself in doing so as well, meaning that Vollering's already at the front of the group on this Wittikon climb at 47 kilometers to go, pacing herself. And this does reduce the group to like the favorites, you would argue, right? Because I'm talking about Vollering, ELB, Labou, Caroline Anderson, really strong race for Sweden. Luke as well for Switzerland. Lippert, you're right. Kopecky, Dijgert, I'm pretty sure. Bradbury, who was also there. Dijgert, I just named Dijgert twice, so I guess she was there twice, according to my notes. But if you see this group so far in the scenario that's happened, Vollering's basically isolated herself.
Yeah, because it's like everyone else is isolated, but yeah, you're also isolated, and you don't have the sprint trump card. And as I'll repeat saying, and it's relevant for the men's race tomorrow, if you don't have a teammate to set you up, you can't just drop everybody on the Wittikon climb. It's not that hard. It's not an HC climb. And as you reminded me in the preview, she didn't drop Kopecky in the Romandy on the mountaintop finish or Swiss, whatever it was. So, but Vollering seems intent on isolating herself. She eventually stops. She's getting frustrated. Other riders start to try to anticipate. Kopecky looks pretty gassed. I think Kopecky has a really tough moment around this phase of the race when it had been launched on the second last Wittikon. I think she was pretty gassed. And I'm thinking this is anticipation time.
I agree, but during that same moment when it comes to Kopecky, when we see Caroline Anderson trying to get a gap, attackers neutralizing that, Labou trying the same, neutralized by Marcus, who came back after dropping on the previous climb, we see Kopecky fishing for beat-ons at the neutral car, and while taking the first beat-on, she actually drops it. So, and I saw the same behavior with Hikir, where they were really suffering with the cold in today's stage. So that's probably something across the entire race with a lot of riders across a lot of teams, but to me, it seemed like Belgium had quite a bit of trouble with the cold because Kopecky couldn't take the beat on. She dropped it. She tried taking the second one. That worked. Eventually got back to the group, but maybe an energy thing. Maybe she missed the beat on earlier, etc. That she had a weaker moment at that point. Who knows? But maybe she might just be gassed. We'll see at the end of this race. And while all this is happening, I already said it. Marcus has got back. Vos is joining again, etc. But
well, no, Vos. So there's an interesting fact. So Marcus immediately anticipates when she joins.
Yeah.
Vos was further behind, and Marcus goes with Hakira again. MVP. How are we pronouncing it?
Hakira.
Okay, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it Antwerp. I'm going to do it from Eindhoven. Hakira.
Justine Jacquier.
Hakira. And then West Flemish, how it's actually said is, softer Hakira. She's she was my best teammate today. I want to shout her out again. She was unbelievable. She's on Marcus, but Marcus does look stronger. Then someone else joins, Ruby Roseman Gannon. Maybe her breakout race today. An unbelievable performance from Ruby today. Really, really strong. Then Vos comes back to Group 2 and I'm going to give Vos a pass here, Benji, also because I like Vos, so it suits my narrative.
Yep.
I'm going to give Vos a pass. She attacks immediately when she joined Group 2. So I don't think without radios, she could have been aware that Marcus was ahead. Even so, it's a good move. No one comes with her, and she's getting 2 in a group of 4 ahead.
Yes. I do have to add more to the situation. There was a long moment where Marcus and Hakir were off the front, and I swear the Netherlands was spacing in the group behind.
Yes, Peterson or Royakkers. Yeah.
So during that moment, they were pacing against themselves. So that's another strike when it comes to no clue what the Dutch were doing at this moment. But after that, gap has so been reduced by Royakkers and Peterson, and Vos comes back. To me, it's logical that she then, okay, the gap is small. Let me try and bridge towards that because the gap is small anyway. And she does do that. By the way, the attack of Rosamund Gannon wasn't earlier. This was with Vos, actually. And while getting to the front, she does gap Vos before they reach Hakira and Marcus. So that was a bit of a, Rosamund Gannon, diamonds in the legs moment for me. But I agree, Vos and Marcus so far, they've been doing what they should be doing in the race like this. Anticipating Marcus, Vos, I also agree the moment she attacked earlier was because most likely she didn't know that Marcus was ahead because she had just joined the group and didn't have enough time to hear from somebody from the Dutch team in that group that there was someone ahead. So no radios, that's what we see in races like that. But I'm okay with that move then of Vos attacking across with Rosamund Gannon. We get a group of 4 ahead. Again, repeat, Marcus Hakira, Vos, and Rosamund Gannon, 2 Dutch riders. And we see Bredewald pacing behind. What
this
the
was shocking. This was really shocking. And Bredewald's the trade teammate, of course, of Vollering, but this gap, if they hadn't paced at all, I'm telling you, this group of 4 is going to the finish. Because Kopecky was good today and played it smart. She wasn't dominant. There's no way Kopecky's getting on the front and closing a minute gap herself.
No.
Not on this group of 4. She wasn't that much stronger than Marcus today. Smarter, but she wasn't that much stronger. And it was just, I couldn't believe it. Now, eventually they stopped Benji when they see them through the finish line. So maybe you say, okay, radios, they didn't. I do not believe that radios were the cause of this. They knew Dutch orange jerseys were ahead. And the gap balloons. The gap balloons going into the final hill circuit of 23 Ks. It goes to 116 before the kicker, before Wittercon. And all of a sudden, the gap starts tumbling. Marcus is looking strong. Now, I would say actually Marcus was too selfless, and that the conventional strategy is that you actually just attack with Marcus on the climbs, and then Vos marks the other 2, and then you win with Marcus solo because she probably was strongest. But she's pacing. She can also just be like, if I bring Mariana Vos to the finish, she'll win. With Ruby's sprint, I'm not so sure. But anyway, by the way, that situation never gets to play out. Because they're pacing, and on the kicker before Wittercon, I think Lippert launches. Lippert launches there.
But we don't know.
I saw a video from a fan on the side of the road showing Lippert on the front. But on the kicker.
The fact that we have to get it from a fan
and also the coverage. The coverage.
This is the Zurich Bergstrasse. The first hill in the last lap of the race.
We all know people are going to attack on this hill. It's the steepest part of the circuit. It's got 17% pinch. Why is there not a fixed camera?
No footage.
Why is there not a fixed camera?
Yeah.
It's the World Championships. Horrible. Yeah. But that group only gets to 45 seconds. And then again, the motor doesn't show. There's a transition period between that and then the final climb of Wittercon, 1.5K, 7%. That group of 4 still got a good gap. I still think they're going to make it to the plateau at least ahead. And all of a sudden, Demi Vollering starts pacing all out on the climb with 2 teammates ahead, theoretically the fastest sprinter ahead. And Benji, I don't mind her having a dig. If you get separation, happy days. But she wasn't gapping everybody. She had Longa Borghini in the wheel bringing her across. Or did ELB attack?
Me, here, I've got her... that's partially the reason that I give her here a bit of a benefit of the doubt.
ELB attacked first.
ELB attacks first. Vollering reacts to that. And when the gap is small enough and Kopecky's off the back, she decides to attack a Longa Borghini. So in this specific scenario, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and actually think it's okay what she's doing. But then eventually, yes, we see Vollering getting to the front group, and she starts hammering it in that group, which now has 3 Dutch riders. 3 Dutch riders being, obviously, Vollering. Next to that, Marcus. Next to that, Vos. Next to that, ELB. Next to that, Rosamund Gannon. And the last rider is Hakiri. And Lippert as well, who made it as well behind ELB and Vollering to that group as well. Kopecky and Dygert are currently dropped. Vollering probably reacts to Kopecky being dropped overly harshly, in my opinion. She goes to the front, starts spacing. In doing so, on the climb, dropping Marcus, and Vos is on a complete limit at the back of the group. At this point, Vos is the fastest sprinter on paper in that group. Yes,
and you got 2 in 5.
Quite a bit of, well, three in.
You could,
7.
yeah, Mark. You could have 3 in, yeah, but then, like Vos, she really just had to let it off a little bit, and Kopecky wouldn't have come back. I think if you wait for Marcus, Kopecky's too close.
Fair, fair.
But also, like, how scared as a Dutch team? How scared do you have to be of Kopecky at this point? Like, I know you don't want her to come back, but she's dropped for a reason. She's not dropped. It's not some strategic master play.
Yeah.
She's dropped for a reason here.
Here she's dropped.
And she's hoping she can come back. But even if she does, if you got 3 in 7, like Benji says, no one else has teammates. I'm sorry, 3 in 7 with Vos also a sprint. Any one of them can win. Dygert also coming back with Kopecky. Dygert also drops Kopecky coming back. She was trucking today. Dygert, really impressive performance today. And it goes to show these TT, like Behrens won yesterday, it makes me think Van der Poel or Pedersen have a good chance tomorrow. Or more of a chance, but today is raining as well, which helps the bigger riders. But yeah, we get to the tempo completely stops. Vollering has paced. She's kind of kept pacing at intermittent periods. She's then stopped pacing. She's talked to Vos, and Marcus is just behind. And Kopecky's not back yet, I don't think. And then Vos starts to drive it under Vollering's orders, which also makes no sense.
No.
Because Vos is the quickest sprinter. With Marcus dangling, trying to come back. I was like, what's going on here? So to me, it seemed like Vollering was calling the shots. Then Marcus does come back. Vollering tells her the same thing to start pacing. And I was thinking, okay, just lock it down. The last 5Ks of this, if you've got numbers, you can't lose if you roll attacks.
But to be clear, at this point we know Kopecky's back as well. Kopecky's made it back to the group, and looking at the last, to be honest, we've got how many kilometers to go right now? 5 or 10?
10, because the last kicker at the top of the plateau is at 10.4.
Yeah, correct. And we get towards the top there, but I feel like at this point we see Vollering attacking again, no? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, so the last kicker, so basically Vos and Marcus come back. Marcus has been pacing. She's going to get dropped. The last kicker is where I think Van der Poel is going to attack tomorrow, before the descent. It's where Behrens attacked yesterday. It is perfect for a explosive attack. Even Vos actually. Vos was cooked, but she could have survived this. She could have survived this kicker. They come over fast, right, left, over a bridge. Positioning's important. You hit it at 50, and then you basically sprint hard for 15, 20 seconds. Vollering goes all out. First of all, it's a perfect effort for Kopecky and Lippert.
Yeah.
They're right in her wheel the whole time. She drops Vos. She drops Marcus, of course, but she full drops Vos, and then she keeps pacing over the top to keep Vos dropped. And she's basically created a situation where she's the slowest sprinter in a group of 5 favorites, including Rosamund Gannon.
Maybe not slowest, but she's not the fastest.
She's definitely... Vollering's sprint not moved me so much this year.
Yeah, but on paper, Vollering sprinted... In the preview, it said Vollering was going to win in a group sprint.
Yes. Yeah, but Kopecky's there, so like you can't think you're going to beat Kopecky.
Not the fastest sprinter.
No, and you got teammates just behind, and she drops them. And then, so Kopecky's played a masterclass. She got dropped on the longest climb. She's come back with Dygert. Dygert's got dropped on the explosive punch there, and now Kopecky's in the wheel for the descent. She's chilling. Yep. She's chilling. They go down the descent. Kopecky takes it all first wheel because she actually has them on a gap a little bit. She's the best center, it seems like. Still Ruby Roseman Gannon, I think, was there. And Lippert, and there's this little kicker before it actually is the final flat 3Ks, and that is where Vollering, I think, paces or attacks again. Longa Borghini attacks. She's got diamonds in the legs just after that kicker into the flat. And I thought when Longa Borghini went Benji, group of 5, no one's got teammates, Vollering's worked, I thought this was the winning move.
Yeah, I thought so as well, because ELB had a pretty large gap instantly, and then Vollering's not the fastest rider in that group, but she takes the responsibility herself to try and close down ELB now, and she looked, honestly, at this point, it looked like Vollering was the strongest rider in the race, regardless of what was happening, because she crawls back ELB slowly but surely with others in the wheel, and she was going to get caught. ELB was going to get caught. Kopecky's still there, but while all that is happening, is it at this moment that we see Ruby Roseman Gannon and was it Dygert as well getting in trouble at the back of the group? And
they got
Roseman
dropped
Gannon
on
dropping?
the roller.
So while that is happening, while all this is happening, we have one of the sprinters, Roseman Gannon, that dropped. So that's an important factor there. Dyger's not there, so that's one rider less to make that move in the final 3 kilometers, for example. So the group is thinning out. And at the top of this climb with 4 kilometers to go, it's ELB, it's Vollering, it's Kopecky, and it's Liane Lippert. Anyone I'm missing?
Nope. That's everybody.
Okay. So that's the group you've got. And I feel like Vollering was still taking over a little bit after ELB was caught.
She was pacing on the flat. She was trying to get them to rotate. I was like, Demi, the only way the Dutch are going to win is if somehow Vos or Marcus come back. Also, because she closed ELB. Like, the funniest thing is, after this whole situation on the final lap, is she has made it possible for Kopecky to win. Without Demi Vollering, Lotte Kopecky had no chance to win this race today. ELB would have won, Marcus or Vos would have won, Roseman Gannon would have won. Vollering was the best for her.
Hot take. In SD work races, Kopecky and Vollering have not been working together very well. Is there any chance in the world that Vollering tried to make Kopecky win here? I don't believe it.
No, she thought she was trying to make her lose, but
yeah, but it backfired.
It backfired, yeah, and then she lost the game of bluff when Longa Borghini attacked, and then Dygert comes back, she doesn't attack, Roseman Gannon attacks, and then it's going to be a sprint. She leads out the sprint, Vollering second wheel, Kopecky's poised, making sure she doesn't get boxed in third wheel, and Kopecky opens the sprint up after ELB jumps a bit too early, which is her want. Lippert a little bit boxed, Dygert comes around the left-hand side, but Lotte Kopecky wins the sprint easily in the end, with Chloe Dygert a valiant second. I would say that has to be by far the best road race result of her career, unless I'm missing something. Not in Canyon SRAM colours, but certainly encouraging for them. They also just extended her by another year, which is fortuitous timing. And she had a brilliant race, but Kopecky wins, Dygert second, Longa Borghini third, Lippert fourth, Vollering fifth, Roseman Gannon sixth, and then seventh, Kekira, Vos and Marcus eighth and ninth in that group, and Blanka Vash wins the group sprint 3 minutes behind, where Puck Pieterse beats Bradbury by 2 positions and so takes the U23 World Championships jersey, which I think she learned about as she crossed the line, or maybe she knew. So Kopecky does it again. You got to be happy as a Belgian, Benji. I mean, credits to her. This is not like when last year, maybe when she just did what she wanted. She played it smart today and wasn't maybe the best. Well, she definitely wasn't the best on the climbs, and she gets the W in the end.
She plays it smart. She was a fantastic cyclist in this race, obviously. But I have to say, even as a Belgian, that she does not win without the Netherlands fucking up as majorly as they did. Like, genuinely. She was able to benefit from that and still be in contention at the end of the race, and she wins the World Championships. And it's not always the strongest team that wins a race. It's always the strongest rider that wins a race, but Kopecky is consistent enough to always be one of the top riders in the world in the majority of races you're in. And then you get chances like this in races where you might not be the strongest, where the race plays out perfect for you and you can win in the end. And she still had to beat everybody in the sprint. She did it. So massive congratulations, 2 world championships in a row. And I gotta be honest, seeing how much the Netherlands fucked up, it's impossible to root for them by the end of this race. The way Demi Vollering rode the last 20 kilometers in this race wasn't just tactically stupid, but looked incredibly selfish. This looked like she was trying to drop Kopecky as much as possible, and in doing so only thinking about her beating Kopecky and her ability and her scenario in which she can beat Kopecky without thinking about how Netherlands can beat Kopecky. Because that scenario was possible.
But at what point do we stop blaming the riders?
Like, I gotta be honest, Loes Kanoëke, I'm sorry, but she's regularly not been a good coach for this team. Like, tactically, under her rule, the Netherlands has had like 6 disasters like this in international championships.
It's a failure of leadership.
It's a failure of leadership, but it might also be a sign that it's 2 ways. It could be a failure of leadership, which I think it partially definitely is, but it's also partially a failure in the riders in terms of how can you not work together for the Netherlands in the majority of the championships that you take on? I think that's also partially responsible for the riders. Vollering should know better in the last 20 kilometers of this race.
Yeah, but how does Vos winning world champs, what does that do for her?
Well, that's the sport of cycling's international championships. Like, that's unfortunately how it works.
I know, but what does it help her that Rihanna Marcus wins worlds?
Oh, we can say that about every single international championships then. What's the point of us riding these? It's not in trade teams, so everybody will be riding against them and every national team. Sorry, but...
Yeah, and I guess the idea is that if you do something... The problem is, normally, if you do something this bad, like, you won't get selected again. Because... And that's where I say the failure of leadership is that I personally don't think Rihanna Marcus or Marianne Vos did anything wrong, Benji. The plan was for them to anticipate and to put pressure on the other teams. Now, can you also blame Roy? Was Royak as being selfish or Bredevold? I mean, they're kind of doing what they're told, no? Like
if Vollering tells them to chase down and Vollering is the assigned leader from leadership, then I can't blame Royakkers for doing that.
No.
And Bredevold, but then again, they probably should know better anyway.
And again, I have no problem with a simple strategy where other people are unhappy. I have no problem. Sit down before the race and say, hey, Marianne, you want to do the Worlds? You can't win. Too hard for you. You've not shown this season you can follow in Liège. Okay, sit her down and say, you want to be in the team? The plan is we're going to make the race as hard as possible for Demi. You happy to do that? There's no anticipating. Yep. You can't win. Same with Marcus and the others. And you say it before the race. And if they say no, I'm not happy to do that, get Caroline Swinkels in. She's pretty good. It's not like the Dutch have a shortage of riders. And so I also think there's no harm in, if Vollering's the best hill classics rider in the world, or you think that, just do a simple strategy all out for her. You don't have to keep everybody happy, but I think there's middle ground where, okay, you can try and win this way, but then also maybe she can try and win this way. In the end, when it gets into the race, Vollering sees those two going up the road and she's like, well, that's not helping me win, is it? If they get 2.5 minutes. And so you need leadership to, I guess, because they're not going to, this has been going on for decades almost.
But hey, their coach is quitting, Loes Kanoëke. I think it's their last event right now. So maybe in the future we see a more established strategy for the Dutch team, because the amount of times we've gone through international championships and seen this shit from the Netherlands, it's honestly frustrating to watch. It's genuinely frustrating to watch. On one end, it's comedic, but on the other end, it's stupid and frustrating. Like, I'm sorry, but if you put the collective brain power used by the Dutch team in the last 20, 30 kilometers in this race in a bird, it would fly backwards.
And I know it's really cold, and I know they're at maximum heart rate. I know that. But the other teams aren't doing this. Belgium, they don't have the superstar team, but they ride perfectly every international championships, pretty much.
Except Leuven men's.
I mean the women's. The men's,
Okay.
and the juniors and U23s also sometimes not so good.
Yeah.
But the women's with Kopecky, 1 liter, bang, this is the plan. Happy days. So it's I think it's comedic occasionally. Like I also don't want the Dutch to win every event, but I also don't think it's the best advertisement for the sport either at the major international championships. Honestly, for this to be happening.
Because then I go to, let's say there's an event where I meet other people that are in journalists, etc. in the sport of cycling. I love women's cycling. I love men's cycling. For me, I see them as different kind of sports because I see women's cycling as more tactical than men's cycling. But then I go to these events and it fucking hurts me that I then hear people saying, okay, but like, oh, those team cars, they're always fucking stupid in women's cycling. Eh? What are these riders doing, etc.? I'm sorry, but these events cause generalization towards women's cycling that I, as a women's cycling fan, don't want to hear because I know that other races prove that that's not true. You know?
Yeah, because we've seen like the Tour de France Femme, you see Canyon Schramm, unbelievable teamwork this year, pulling off the huge upset by 4 seconds with the big underdog. They were all around Nivea Doma and they played it perfectly. But yeah, I agree with you. But that's, I also want to give...
That's how the cookie crumbles.
That's how the cookie crumbles, and credits to Kopecky to win back-to-back world champs. And she's the number 1 rider by ranking this year, and she has won a lot of races, won Roubaix, won world championships, won Tour de Romandie GC, won Europeans ITT, were 3rd in Olympics, won Tour of Britain, pretty good season, won Strada, won UAE Tour GC, different season, but what a season from her. And also, Longa Borghini, she's unlucky not to win. I want to see if I can pick out anybody else. Rosemond Gannon, huge result from her to finish in the top 6. Nomi Rug continues her strong performance in 11th, the Swiss, as well as Magdalene Valliere, the Canadian. She's been extended until the end of 27 by EF Oatley Cannondale, who I believe will be a pro team next year. She's had a very good year, and she's progressing quite well as Caroline Anderson, the Swede on Liverlula Jaco, who seems to excel in horrible conditions or hard, long races. So anything else to pick out from the race, Benji?
I don't think so. I don't think I have much more to add from this race, only that Peters won the U23 one, I'm pretty sure, for the Netherlands. So at least they got something out of today's race. They didn't deserve it, but...
Yeah, she's had a breakout year as well, winning a stage of the Tour de France Femme, and now, the U23 title in just 16 race days. She was in the top 10 of all but 2 World Tour one-day races. She did the whole gamut of Ronde van Vlaanderen, Strada, etc. And I think she's going to kick on next year. She's only 22 years old, and I think next year she will. She will. We won't see the U23 jersey, but she's going to win a big one next year, big one-day race. That's, I think, clear in my mind at least, especially as Phoenix de Koning are very, very strong. But it's a strange race, strange and horrible weather. Anything from the race and the circuit, Benji, from not just this race but the other races that change your mind or about tomorrow for the men's?
Well, firstly, I didn't think the circuit was as hard as the Montreal circuit in terms of the ability for Pogacar to make separation. I feel like the bigger climb, the longer climb, isn't as hard as the Montreal climb. There's a kilometer of 10% in the Montreal one, and here we just kind of don't have that. So I'm more and more starting to believe in a scenario where we might just have like a group of 6-7 riders with a random rider attacking and others looking at each other. You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because there's just so many little punches on this circuit. It's like everyone knows the obvious place to attack. It's the 800-meter climb at the entrance of the Witticon. It's the Witticon itself. But then the plateau is where the real places to slip away are. And particularly, I keep repeating, like where Behrens attacked yesterday, that is the perfect attack point for Van der Poel, not for Pogacar. That is for sprinters. It's a 20-second watt per kilo burst. and Van der Poel has the best 22nd watt per kilo in the world, I think, just about, or at least 22nd compound. So that's going to be the place where he can attack. It's also technical. The descents have been almost more decisive than the Wittercon, I would say. So I don't know. I think it's supposed to be sunny tomorrow. Not been the best advertisement for Zurich, I would say, the World Championship so far, for various reasons. But yeah, the weather's been horrendous. And I think it's made me think Van der Poel has more of a chance, but then it's difficult to compare. These are much shorter races. Tomorrow's 270 Ks, 4,000 meters climbing. It's still Pogačar is correctly the favorite still because of that quantity of climbing.
But putting the men's race aside, I do want to spend the last 5 minutes of this podcast on the topic we mentioned at the start of this podcast. Muriel Fur, who passed away, Swiss rider, 18 years old, in the junior race about 2 days ago now, roughly. Firstly, whenever a rider passes away in the sport of cycling, it's like, so my camera just perished. I will try to fix that.
Oh, I can still hear you, Benji.
Okay, I'll continue talking. Whenever a rider passes away in the sport of cycling, it's like a stab in the heart, and it's like the cycling family loses a member. It's weird to say, but people are doing what they love in the sport of cycling. Cycling for the cyclists is what they love. They're doing that, and we want them to be able to do that in the safest conditions possible. And whenever this happens, I always feel like the instant reaction is, yes, we mourn the passing of that rider rightfully, but there's also the reaction of, I think it's too early to draw conclusions. We can't point fingers at potential safety issues yet. I'm done with that shit. I'm sorry, but I'm completely done with that side of the argument. I feel like whenever people say it's not time yet to point at potential issues in the sport that could result in injuries, severe injuries, or riders that pass away doing what they love, I think it's never too early to talk about that. And I've changed my mind on this over the last few years because we've had so many people lost in this sport. Whether it's Bjorn Lambrecht, whether it's, Jesus Christ, we've had so many, Gino Meder, and now Muriel Fur. It's getting so incredibly infuriating, not just sad, but infuriating that I can count the amount of pro-safety decisions that the UCI has made in the last, 5 to 10 years on a single hand. And we don't know whether this could have been prevented by a decision of the UCI, whatever. We do hear some news sources like Blick, for example, pointing out that it took a very long time for Muriel to be picked up by a helicopter, a rescue helicopter.
Apparently, according to Blick, yes, it wasn't clear. There's an investigation, etc. People aren't talking about it. Staff or security people have been told not to talk about it, according to Blick and Swiss media. It's a police matter now because, of course, somebody has died. But it seems pretty clear that it wasn't discovered that she had crashed and was basically fallen into the forest until the completion of the race for at least an hour, which on a closed city circuit at the major international championships, that is just, I don't care what the outcome of the investigation is.
Yes.
That in other sports, this would not be acceptable. And yeah, I agree, Benji, the fact that 3 times in the last 13 months, we've had to come on the podcast and talk about a young person dying in cycling. And I understand that. I also have accepted that in covering the sport, when we're going to watch people do 100k an hour descents, and I know they're going to take risks to win or come back, I know if they crash, that bad things can happen, and I really don't think there's any way to fully eliminate it. But for someone to crash on a city circuit, and like you can't eliminate all crashes, which is what I really don't like from, I think, Lepatien's interview, but you cannot eliminate crashes. The riders call. I accept that. Sometimes the riders crash. But the consequences of those crashes on a closed circuit, they can be managed better. That is inarguable. And so it's really, really sad, and our condolences to Muriel Thure's family, and to all those who knew her, rode with her, to the Swiss cycling community once again. But I agree, it's like, what's changing? Gino Maeda passed away. What was the big safety reform?
I've seen
Let's
nothing.
trial not having radios
nothing.
in the race.
Exactly. They're trying to ban radios now, which is the only piece of communication. If I'm a cyclist, if I drop into a ravine by the side of the road, if I'm conscious, it's the only way I can tell my team car that I'm not laying on the road, that I'm not still on my bike, etc.
Or your teammate tells the car you crashed, who sees you crash.
Exactly. Even your teammates or your breakaway companions, which this happened at the Giro this year.
Yeah.
Capio fell into a forest. And the only reason he was found was because the breakaway companions he was with were able to contact their team car and say that Capio was there. It is incompetent, incomprehensible that the UCI then thinks, oh, maybe the races will be more entertaining or more safer if we ban radios. Safety should always come first. And I'm sorry, but David Lapartien, the guy's a politician. To me, it doesn't seem like he gives a fuck about rider safety. He mainly cares about his own political positions and how he can further his own career. And we need someone in charge of the UCI, because it all starts with the governing body. Like, if we look at the potential things that need to change in cycling, maybe trackers on cyclists, crash alerts. I don't know if a phone or something is required to send a crash alert out. I don't know. Technologically, something must be possible. Don't try to ban radios. Concussion detection technology in helmets. Actually implying the parkour guidelines that say that a sprint shouldn't have a bend, that descent finish shouldn't exist. Centralizing crash data so you can take conclusions from that. Learn from those parts. Increase the safety standards for helmets. Like concussion reducing things when it comes to the force of head movement. That's measurable. MIPS and so forth. Those kind of systems. Why is that not a standard yet? Consistent and stricter rider behavior. Rules being applied properly. Reducing the unnecessary amount of vehicles in races. Rules like a team car needs to stay at the back of the breakaway. And a rider needs to go to the back instead of a car coming forward. There are so many things. A lot of which are quick wins to change. There's also quite a few things that require financial investment, research and development. But if safety is not something we can invest in as a sport, what the fuck are we doing?
Wow, and it's been politicized. With Safer it was introduced, and then it seemed to have had the legs taken out of it. But yeah, it's just really, really, really sad, and like,
and I
don't know
so
how,
infuriating.
I don't know how these people can. Like, honestly, I don't know how these people can turn up at these events, and after what has happened to Ms. Fura and her family, and to give the quotes they give, and to just walk around, they should hang their head in shame, honestly, like, at your event. And to then say, oh, well, the riders are at fault 50% of the time, like...
That quote, the fact that David Lapartien said in the press conference after what happened, half the crashes are caused by the riders, so it's not always the organizer and UCI's fault. Holy fuck, how can you look in the mirror and say that?
It's like, yeah, people make handling mistakes. They're riding bikes downhill. They're racing in the wet, by the way. There was also water all over the descent today, like a lake on the descent. They're gonna crash. Like, it's the same in F1. People crash, but the people haven't. I don't think there hasn't been a fatality in Formula One in 7 years. Since David Ferrer and Jules Bianchi's death prompted huge, I think, safety reforms and the halo being introduced. And it's like, as I said, like, it is easy for us to just say our condolences to the family, and we'll wait for what the police report says. But what? And then nothing happens. It's just normalized, and every 6 months we're going to do this in cycling? Like, come on, this has to be the instigation for some sort of radical safety change. Or you just say, oh, well, that's the nature of cycling on open roads, which I don't agree with.
And then a rider that is in the race after the one that Muriel Fura rode rides past the spot in the first lap, sees ambulances, etc. Ambulances coming a half an hour later, so that's already in the next race that is happening. He posts on social media that there were a limited amount of barriers in that segment. I think it was taped off with like one tape or something, etc., based on the picture I saw. And then he gets told by his national federation to delete his comment on social media saying that, I'm sorry, but if riders are not allowed to give their opinion on the safety of the sport, then how can we move forward?
Yep. Anyway. Very, very sad.
Sorry to end today's podcast on a sad note, but
yeah, let's thoughts to the family of Muriel Fouret, and indeed they did give their consent or blessing, I guess, for the championships to continue, and our condolences from LRCP to her family, friends, and of course the Swiss Federation, which has lost another one of its young. So we'll end the podcast there. Thanks for listening as always, and we're back for the men's race tomorrow. Ciao.